Okay, good morning, hello, and everyone, and good morning. My name is Ralph Smith, and I'm the USDA NRCS National Watershed Program Manager. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. First, please deactivate your cameras to help us minimize the network bandwidth needed to generate this presentation. Also, please know that we will be silencing everyone's microphones during the presentation, and this presentation is being recorded. Okay, before we continue, I'd like to introduce Kevin Farmer, the Branch Chief for Watershed Programs. Kevin, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you for everyone that has called on in today. This is our sixth session that we've done, providing an opportunity for both NRCS and sponsors and partners to be able to have a platform to discuss the watershed program, and also to provide some level of back and forth training and insight on how projects are developed and how the funding and ranking process is done here at NRCS. The goal for today's session is to primarily work with those sponsors and partners out there who are so vital to the success of the program, and being able to communicate to you some of the basic points of the program, as well as some of the key factors that play into the ability for us to actually provide funding and implementation assistance for the projects that we have. So today, we're hoping that from the information that we provide, it'll be beneficial for you all as project sponsors as you pursue funding for this year, but also it'll be beneficial for the future opportunities for you to be able to access more resources to watershed operations and help us to continue to put successful projects on the landscape. Ralph has put together a great presentation. This is our sixth opportunity of doing it, and most of these have been posted on our SharePoint site, and there's also a link that we may be able to get out to the public. We're hoping that we can, so that you all can go back and do this and share it as much as needed. So with that, Ralph, I will turn it back over to you, and I'll be doing my best to field any questions that come across the chat as we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So we're going to jump right into things this morning. First, we'll cover the agenda for the presentation. We're going to provide an overview of the Watershed Operations Program. I will then discuss how you, as potential sponsors, can work with your local NRCS office to initiate a watershed project effort. Next, we will direct you to where to find the guidance on preparing funding proposals and discuss the deadline for submitting proposals for fiscal year 2020. At the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions. At any time, feel free to type your questions into the team's chat window. We will address as many questions as possible at the conclusion of the meeting. So here we'll talk a little bit about the background of the Watershed Operations Program. There are actually three programs under the NRCS Watershed Programs umbrella. Those programs are the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, the Watershed Rehabilitation Program, and the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Program, commonly known as Watershed Operations Program. The Watershed Rehabilitation Program is used to bring dams built by NRCS up to current standards. The Emergency Watershed Protection Program helps communities recover after natural disasters, events such as hurricanes, floods, or fires. Through this program, NRCS is able to help communities remove debris and stabilize damaged areas. You're here today to learn about the Watershed Operations Program. The Flood Control Act of 1944 and the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Act, commonly known as PO 566, are the foundational legislation for the Watershed Operations Program. The purpose of the program was to authorize the Natural Resources Conservation Service to provide assistance in the planning and installation of flood control measures to reduce losses caused by flooding. The Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Act, as amended, authorizes the Secretary of Agriculture to cooperate with states and local agencies in planning and carrying out works of improvement for soil conservation and for other purposes. It provides for technical, financial, and credit assistance by the USDA to local organizations representing the people living in watersheds. It also provides for needed additional treatment and protection of federally owned lands within such watersheds. The watershed program requires the development of physically, environmentally, socially, and economically sound watershed project plans with actions scheduled for implementation over a specified period of years. Watershed project plans contain project actions, which are formally planned undertakings carried out within a specified geographic area by sponsors for the benefit of the general public. PO 566 sets forth three general purposes: preventing damage from erosion, floodwater, and sediment, furthering the conservation, development, utilization, and disposal of water, and furthering the conservation and proper utilization of land. The previously mentioned general purposes are more specifically refined as shown here. Every NRCS watershed project will have one or more of these purposes. In the next few slides, we will review each purpose in detail. As we do so, think about watershed scale projects in your state that could be addressed under the authority of one or more of these purposes. Flood prevention. Because this is the most widely utilized purpose, we will read the entire description. Flood prevention or flood damage reduction measures are installed to prevent or reduce damages caused by floodwater. Flood damage reduction is further defined as the control and disposal of surface water caused by abnormally high direct precipitation, stream flow, or floods aggravated or caused by wind or tidal effects. Flood damage reduction and mitigation measures reduce or prevent floodwater damages by reducing runoff, erosion, and sediment, modifying the susceptibility of improvements in the floodplain to damage, removing damageable property from the floodplain, or reducing the frequency, depth, or velocity of flooding. Measures may also include actions that prevent encroachment into the floodplain. Two examples of this are where one state is currently working under this purpose to buy out homes in an area that has experienced repeated damage due to flooding for a number of years. Another state is building levees around farmland to protect the fields from frequent flooding. The next purpose we'll discuss is the watershed protection purpose. The watershed protection purpose consists of land treatment practices within a watershed that result in reduced off-site flooding, erosion, sediment and agricultural pollutants. Project measures result in conserved or developed soil, improved water quality or quantity, enhancements to woodland, fish and wildlife habitat, recreation and scenic resources. Watershed protection can also involve the conservation of energy. A watershed project NRCS Tennessee worked with the town of Oneida to accomplish in the Bear Creek watershed had this purpose. The project resulted in aquatic life returning to reaches of Bear Creek that had been void of life for many years. Remnants of mining in the area during the 1900s resulted in acid mine drainage going directly into the creek and all but terminating any life in the waterway. The project also had a tremendous unexpected benefit of economic development to the area, increased home sites, and the construction of a recreational sports complex. Under the public recreation purpose, measures may include picnic areas, sanitary facilities, fishing piers, shelters, cooking grills, parking areas, swing beaches, access roads, water, and trails. The public fish and wildlife purpose involves the improvements of the habitat or the environment for the breeding, growth, and development of fish and wildlife. The agricultural water management purpose includes drainage, groundwater recharge, irrigation, water conservation, water quality improvement, and agricultural, including rural communities' water supply. Work in this purpose must serve groups of landowners and communities. The state in the West is working within their watershed to install basins to help the recharge of aquifers. This effort will have direct benefit to producers who rely on irrigation to keep their crops efficiently watered. The purpose of the municipal and industrial water supply covers those measures necessary to provide storage capacity in reservoirs to increase the availability of water for present and future municipal and industrial uses. Under this purpose, NRCS can work with sponsors to cover the cost for outlet works and pipelines to convey water from water bodies to existing or proposed treatment facilities or water systems. Water quality management measures provide water storage capacity in reservoirs for regulation of stream flow to improve water quality in streams. Dams that were built by NRCS can be rehabilitated to modern standards to this purpose. NRCS does not rehabilitate dams not constructed by NRCS. When you or your organization approaches NRCS with a project idea, you most likely have an idea of how you think the resource concern needs to be addressed. Maybe your organization has done studies or hired consultants to help you develop solutions to your issue. This information can be very valuable. However, because each NRCS authorized project is considered a federal action, we must follow an approach that requires us to consider all possible alternatives that might address the resource concern. We encourage sponsors to keep an open mind and be open to information that may be revealed during the planning process. As you work with NRCS, you might present an idea such as, our community would like to install 8 basins to aid in the recharge of our aquifers. We know exactly where we would like to build them, and this project will greatly help the farmers who irrigate their fields with center pivots. The NRCS planners are likely to describe your project as, this project in the Happy River watershed will have the purpose of agricultural water management. The project will address the need to recharge the aquifer, which will benefit producers who utilize irrigation in the watershed. Notice, in the NRCS approach, we do not specifically discuss what measures are planned to be installed. We simply state the purpose, agricultural water management, and the need to recharge the aquifer. We'll now review the main statutory requirements of the program. First, the project must have a sponsor that meets the eligibility requirements, which include having the power of eminent domain and the authority to levy taxes. For this funding cycle, we are requesting that fund requests be limited to no more than $25 million. Requests greater than $25 million must be congressionally approved. Agricultural benefits, including those to rural communities, must comprise at least 20% of the benefits of the project. This is not about acres, but about the financial benefits that can be attributed to a specific purpose. Additional information on benefits is available in the NRCS Watershed Manual and the NRCS National Water Resources Handbook for Economics. The project must be less than 250,000 acres. The project must not include any single structure that provides more than 12,500 acre-feet of floodwater detention capacity. The project provides no more than 25,000 acre-feet of total capacity. An appealing characteristic of this program is that it allows the agency to do projects on private lands. This includes not only property owned by ranchers and farmers, but non-agricultural landowners as well. We'll next discuss the financial assistance provided through the PO 566 program. This table shows the financial assistance available through PO 566. Let's look at one of the listed purposes and explain how the project would flow when NRCS funds are available. we continue the example used earlier, whose purpose was agricultural water management, for a project that aims to focus on groundwater recharge, if the project is selected for funding by the NRCS chief, NRCS staff can begin the process of developing a watershed plan, environmental assessment, or a watershed plan environmental impact statement. The cost for this planning, technical assistance, is entirely covered by NRCS. In addition, after the plan is authorized, the effort to design specific measures will also be covered by NRCS. Only at the time of construction will the project sponsor need to provide their matching 25%. If any land rights are required for the project, the sponsor will need to acquire those at their own expense. So now we'll discuss a little bit about the funding that we've received in the last couple of years. The watershed program has only recently been refunded to operational levels. After 7 years of no appropriations, the watershed operations program was provided $150 million in 2017. During that year, 20 states requested funds and 48 projects were selected for funding. The watershed program was allocated $150 million in the year 2018. 16 states requested funds and 47 projects were selected for funding. Last year, 21 states submitted a total of 76 proposals. These 76 proposals contained a cumulative request of $280 million. Congress allocated the watershed program $150 million in discretionary funds and $50 million in mandatory funds through the 2018 Farm Bill. This map shows the 21 states that were allocated funds in 2019. For this year, Congress appropriated $175 million in discretionary funds and $50 million in mandatory funds. We anticipate a good batch of proposals and look forward to funding projects that will have a meaningful impact throughout the country. The deadline for submitting proposals is April the 17th. So for the last 4 years, the program has been appropriated almost $1 billion. In recent remarks by the Deputy Chief of Programs, the program has the potential to become a $1 billion a year program. To do that, we're going to have a lot of great projects going at all of the phases of work. In the next slides, we'll discuss how you as a sponsor work with NRCS to get project funding proposals submitted. So if you're here today, you can probably think of a resource concern in your state or community that could possibly be addressed through one of the watershed program project purposes. Maybe there's an issue with flooding in a small town or a rural area with impaired water due to abandoned mines or agricultural runoff. How do you get started? In each state, the NRCS state conservationist is the person who is ultimately responsible for making sure that all USDA NRCS programs are carried out properly. The state conservationist has program managers who work on the day-to-day operation and implementation of the programs. At the county level, NRCS district conservationists are the face of all USDA NRCS programs, and are usually the first points of contact for projects. District conservationists play a crucial role rallying the community and engaging local stakeholders and partners. They also help coordinate many aspects of a project's planning, design, and eventual implementation. So in many situations, the DC might be the first person who's contacted about a potential project. The DC will elevate requests for potential projects to the state watershed program manager. The state program manager then works with the project sponsor to determine if the project meets the program requirements. This may be accomplished through a preliminary investigation of the request. Because projects are managed at the state level, the state conservationist and program manager evaluate each request to initiate a project considering the performance priorities of the state conservationist and the staff and financial resources that are available to accomplish the request. Project sponsors must work through the local NRCS state program managers to develop and submit funding proposals. Let's look at a project idea from its start and show how it flows through NRCS. The project idea starts at the local or state level. Landowners, community activists, and stakeholders come together in support of addressing a resource concern in their community. Initially, They may talk to the district conservationist about the idea, and the district conservationist tells them about the USDA NRCS watershed program. Because the project involves several landowners, some of whom are not farmers or producers, the watershed program seems like it would be a good fit to address the issue. The district conservationist arranges a meeting with the state program manager and project sponsor. When the state program manager and project sponsor meet, they go over the watershed issue and what things might be done to resolve it. The state program manager reviews the program requirements with the sponsor. If it's determined that the project is compatible with the watershed operations program, and the state conservationist gives the project the green light, the state project manager and project sponsor will work together to develop a funding proposal. Funding proposals may be submitted for only one phase of a project's work at a time. There are 3 phases: planning, design, and construction. Working through the state conservationist and program manager, the proposal is submitted to NHQ for funding, to request funding. The proposal will be evaluated and ranked by an interdisciplinary team. Ultimately, the chief of NRCS determines which projects are approved for funding. Guidance on preparing for proposals is available in the NRCS e-directives, Bulletin 390-20-7. It provides instructions on how to develop proposals and lists the ranking criteria that would be used to evaluate each proposal. You can access the information at the link provided. However, please know that you cannot submit a proposal directly to NRCS NHQ. You must work through your state NRCS office. The deadline for proposals is April 17. We plan to have funds out to the states by June the 12th. One thing to note is that the funding proposals are not requests for all of the federal assistance that will be needed to complete the project. Each proposal is a request for funds needed in that year. In general, we will only approve funding for one phase of work at a time. In the next several slides, I'll go over the 8 sections that funding proposals must include. The first section covers the general eligibility of the project. The general requirements must be met for proposals to be considered. This includes the statutory requirements of 20% agricultural benefits, being less than 250,000 acres, and having an eligible sponsor. The proposal should include a brief narrative that confirms the conditions of the proposal and qualifies how it meets each requirement. The project overview must include an abstract describing the issue, background, and solution, the sponsor's participation in public engagement, a narrative describing the proposed action, the purpose and need for action, the description of the purposes for which the project is planned, and the description of the need for action in terms of what problems need to be solved and what opportunities need to be realized. The project overview should also include an estimated project cost, to include the PO 566 funds needed and any other funds needed. There should also be an estimation of the monetary benefits and an estimated benefit to cost ratio. In the next 3 sections, the sponsor request in environmental actions and alternatives, we'll discuss what is expected to be in those sections of the proposal. The sponsor request letter must be signed by the sponsor and include a statement of the sponsor's related experience, readiness, willingness to meet their requirements, and ability to complete the project. The environmental evaluation section at a minimum must include a completed NRCS CPA 52 form. It should also identify all known problems, identify any threatened and endangered species and cultural resource concerns, and identify any cultural or historical places or historical resources. It should also include any information on existing plans, EIS documents developed by other federal agencies. In the alternatives section, we provide a template so that each alternative can be, the details of each alternative can be listed. Reviewers of the proposals will expect that the proposal of each alternative will be described in detail. The proposal will also need to include a list of the alternatives and provide the cost sharing breakdown for each alternative. In the partnership, consultation, coordination, and public participation section, the proposal should thoroughly describe the role, resources, and contributions of each partner involved. Any federal, state, local, private, or corporate partners involved should be identified. Any past or present public participation should be described. The proposal should discuss diversity amongst partners and participants and indicate any leveraging of partner resources that would make the proposal more attractive. In the equal opportunity section, the proposal should discuss how this project will contribute to the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. Any direct benefits to the historically underserved or socially disadvantaged groups should be included in this section of the proposal. In the potential of preferred alternative section, a narrative description should be provided that contains rationale for alternative preference, proposed measures to be installed, estimated cost and cost sharing, responsibilities, potential mitigation needs, permits and compliance requirements, outcomes, budget and installation timeline, and the leveraging of other funds. We will send out a copy of the bulletin and proposal guidance to the NRCS program managers and to everyone who responded to this Outlook meeting invitation. Just as a reminder that the deadline for the proposal period this go round is April the 17th. Okay, on to the next section. If you're not sure how to contact the NRCS office or watershed program manager, the fastest way is to head to the NRCS website. The link is shown here, www.nrcs.usda.gov. To contact the watershed program manager directly, use the sequence of clicks shown at the bottom of this slide. Go to the NRCS webpage, click Programs, Landscape Planning, Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program, and a list of program managers can be found there. All right, to recap what we have discussed today. First thing we did was provide an overview of the Watershed Operations Program. We talked about how the Watershed Program started and the 8 purposes, including rehabilitation, that work is done under. The statutory requirements of the program, project areas less than 250,000 acres, 20% agricultural benefits, and the requirements for sponsorship were then discussed. The table showing the different percentages for funding assistance was then reviewed. In this section, you learned that a project has agricultural water management. In this section, you learned that a project that has agricultural water management as its purpose can have its engineering technical assistance 100% funded by NRCS and its construction up to 75% funded with a 25% sponsor match. We reviewed watershed program funding since 2017 and discussed the 2020 appropriation, $175 million in discretionary funds and $50 million in mandatory funds. Next, we discussed how sponsors must work with their state conservationists and program managers to develop proposals. Project sponsors can submit proposals directly to NRCS. Project sponsors cannot submit proposals directly to NRCS NHQ. In some cases, state program managers may conduct a preliminary investigation to determine if a project is compatible with the NRCS watershed program and how it fits into the state conservationist performance priorities. Lastly, we directed you to the NRCS e-directives and the guidance for preparing a proposal. Again, the deadline to submit proposals is April the 17th. Okay, so now we're going to check out the chat window and see if we got any questions. Let's see here.
So Ralph, we had at least 2 that I've responded to.
Okay. Let me show them on the screen so everybody can see them. Hold on a second, Kevin.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So Lisa started with the slide deck, and you had mentioned that we will be sharing the presentation link after the presentation. I think that one was covered.
You're getting out on the schedule.
I said the link to the presentation will be posted afterwards. You had mentioned that, so that covers Lisa's question about the slide deck.
Okay.
Yeah. Calvin and Cynthia, I think it was, had a question in regards to the extension of the deadline. So the actual notice of funding availability that was released on March the 16th, I think it was posted internally on the 13th, but then there was a more prominent release of the notice of funding availability on the 16th of March. So the actual notice that the money in the request period have been open has been out for almost 3 weeks now. So what we are doing is continuing to move forward with the deadline of April 17th. One of the big reasons for that is we have about a third of the money that is part of this fiscal year's funding is either annual dollars or money that has to be obligated this fiscal year to meet the requirements of the appropriation. So as a result, if we don't get the funds to the state, allocated to the state in June, there is an internal contracting deadline that we have to work with in order to get the funds obligated that is in July. And that's a lot of internal stuff that you guys probably don't want to hear about. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to say is, in order for us to meet the requirements of the funding, it has to be obligated this year. And in order for it to be obligated this year, it has to be into contracting by July so that they can get into the national contracting work plan and their workload. And in order for that to happen, we have to allocate the money in June. In order for us to allocate the money in June, we have to close the deadline in April, so that we are able to do the ranking review and proposal to the chief that all the money is in the state by early June. And that gives the states a little time, it's gonna be tight, but a little time to meet the contracting deadline. What we will likely do is later this summer, once the first round of funding is allocated, we will likely announce a second round of funding. Those funds may not go out in fiscal year 2020. They would most likely go out in early fiscal year 2021 because in 2020 you wouldn't have any time to do anything with the money anyway. So it wouldn't do us any good of allocating funding in August and September because there's nothing that could be done with it. The money would be swept and you'd get it in October anyway. So there's nothing we could do about that. So the answer to the question is we are going to keep the April 17th deadline. It's a very tight deadline. We're going to do another announcement later this summer, and that announcement will allow for us to do an earlier allocation to states in October of next year.
Okay.
So they said they couldn't hear what I was saying. Could you hear that, Ralph, or was it real?
I could hear what you were saying. It did cut out a little bit, but probably 90% of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Yeah. So the next question, can 566 funding be applied to a structure owned by the Bureau of Rec? I also noticed that your slide deck said that project cannot.
Okay, sorry, Kevin. I had to cut you off. Kevin, you're gonna have to speak back in. I had cut somebody's mic was on, so I had to cut everyone off. But you can start talking again. Cut your mic back on. Or you're gonna have to cut your mic back on. Oop.
Oh, there.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I was talking.
Yeah, I know you were going away.
Okay, thank you. So I'm reading Lisa's question here about the 566. 566 funding used on the Bureau of Rec. So we can't use it on a structure owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. 566 funding can only be used on an authorized PL 566 project. So that would be one that has an authorized plan, and that would not be one likely that, well, it wouldn't be one that's owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. It said 250,000 acres. Rather than the watershed must be 250,000 acres. So a sub watershed has to be less than 250,000 acres. However, the restriction of 250,000 acres was relaxed in the 19th funding and the 20 funding, which allows for only any project that is not providing for flood protection, that limit does not apply. So for those projects that are not flood protection like structures, they don't have that limit. Reg also says it doesn't be applied based on irrigation problem shed. So yeah, I think I just answered that in that the limit is not applied for those summer. The summer funds are not new funds. What I was saying was the funding opportunity in the summer would be the same funding. We would just announce another period based on the funding that remains available. We would announce the same funding. Calvin has a question: how different are the 2020 proposal requirements from the proposed submittal through NRCS State Office in 2018? We were told of the second round of funding in 2018 and 19, never received any feedback on proposals submitted. So the funding proposal requirements are not extremely different. We added a PIR this time, and we added a couple more things that we needed in the application, but the basic of the proposal is the same. Please discuss how RCP affects ranking of projects. RCPP affects ranking of projects because if you are already receiving RCPP funding for work, we cannot award PL 566 funding the same thing. So there's a question in the ranking where we're looking at, has this project received RCPP funding to do this work? Now, a good example of there being RCPP funding, but not a contradiction or a
Kevin, can you hold on a second? Hold on 1 second. I've got to try to, someone's
mute again. Okay.
Hold on a second. No, whoever Fernando Garza is, we're gonna mute him. All right, there you go.
You better?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, good. So if a project has received RCPP funding, and let's say there's a component of the project that is being funded by RCPP, let's say it's land treatment. However, the structural measures are not included in the RCPP agreement or the contract, and the rest of the plan that's been authorized is not being funded through RCPP, then those pieces that are not being funded through RCPP can be funded through the 566 program because it in fact is already an authorized 566 plan. So what we're saying is we won't go in and fund something that RCPP is already funding, not necessarily the same project, but same component. We have had requests where a project was receiving, let's say a dam was being constructed and it was receiving funding for RCPP to do the construction, and then they requested funding for 566 also to do the same construction and just changing the cost share rate. So that we would not do. But if you have a land treatment practice here in the authorized plan and then a structural measure in the authorized plan, and RCPP is only covering the land treatment and the structural measures are being covered by 566, that we would do. We've done that before in the past. Brian Lang has a question. Will NRCS supply the required TPA 52 for the proposal? NRCS, Brian, has the responsibility of doing the entire proposal in actuality. That's what Ralph's point was. This proposal requirement is not a requirement placed upon the sponsors to submit. It's required that the states, NRCS state offices each submit the proposals to NHQ for funding consideration. What we're trying to strive for is that throughout the year, NRCS is working with our sponsors cohesively in a manner where we know, not just when the funding proposals come out, but all throughout the year, that we know what our sponsors' needs are. And as Ralph had mentioned, sometimes it may be the district conservation or someone who becomes aware of the need. We want this to be an ongoing thing where watershed operations needs are communicated to NRCS on a daily basis, so that when the funding request notification comes out, that you don't need to go out and contact all your sponsors because we've been working with you throughout the year. And that's the model that we're trying to get into, where NRCS is working with you on a daily basis, and that those sponsors then have communicated to NRCS what our needs are. NRCS knows how to go in, begin developing a proposal, and then when the funding announcement comes out, those proposals can be automatically uploaded and move through the process. This is our third year of doing some of this. However, we're still trying to get to the point of actually being able to communicate with sponsors throughout the entire year so that we can make that happen. So Brian, NRCS is responsible for doing the proposal as a whole. We're asked that we work with our partners and sponsors to develop the proposals and the needs. Lisa wants to know, how are you managing backlog versus new projects, prioritizing, in other words? So the backlog projects, if they have completed a feasibility and determined that reaffirming the feasibility and determine that the projects are still feasible, once they've done that, the backlog projects are ones we're expecting to be ready to go. If they are ready to go and they are truly projects that can commence, we're funding those backlog projects for either design or construction. However, we are making sure that there's funding left over to do new projects, and that we always have a good representation of new projects. There's not a split, Lisa, like a certain percentage that goes to backlog and new. We're identifying those backlog projects that are ready, as well as bringing in a few new projects as we can. But there's no strict prioritization over the backlog versus new. The backlogs just have to be ready to go so that we've confirmed that the reaffirming of the feasibility has been completed. Can you please define a sponsor? A sponsor is a subdivision of the state, a state agency, conservation district, drainage district, a city, municipality, town, county agency, a tribal organization. Any non-private entity can be a sponsor. A local government organization, a subdivision of the state could be a sponsor of that. If we, Trey wants to know, if we as sponsors request a proposal submitted to our state CUN on Monday, will they be required to meet the April 17th deadline? Yes, Trey, they still have to meet that deadline, but in the event they can't meet the deadline, they should not stop developing your proposal. They need to get it ready so that when the next round of funding comes out, they will be able to submit it and have that submittal ready for this second round of funding later this summer. But hopefully they can meet it. We have been communicating to a lot of the program managers, and Calvin even mentioned that we had told folks that we were going to do a second round of funding last year. And what ended up happening is we just carried over the 19 funding and didn't do the second round. Hold on, my question. Let's see.
Yeah.
All right.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, on my. All right. So Trey, to answer your question, they may not be able to make the 17th deadline. They're required to meet it, but if they don't meet the 17th deadline, they need to try to get this summer's later request period and submit it in. Calvin wants to know, do most backlog dams require a feasibility study? If it's more than 5 years old, Calvin, yes, that plan would require a feasibility. It's not necessarily a feasibility study, but it's a reaffirming of the feasibility where they check to make sure that the conditions in the watershed have not changed, meaning that upstream and downstream conditions are the same, where they haven't built any new structures downstream or the land use hasn't changed, revisiting the economics, revisiting the cultural resources and the environmental impacts to make sure that what we had authorized more than 5 years ago is the same. And also making sure that, the landowners and public buy-in is still there. So if it's more than 5 years old, we are requiring that a reaffirming of feasibility be done. And it's really a short process, and it shouldn't take much more than a few weeks to a month to do a reaffirming of feasibility at the most. We kind of streamlined that. Cindy wants to know, can you tell us about the planning funds that are new this year and how they work? Not sure exactly what you mean by that, Cindy, but the funding that we received this year, it's one pot of money, and we don't necessarily divide it up for planning, design, and construction. But Ralph had explained earlier that the way funding works is once a proposal is submitted, we will review and rank those proposals and make a recommendation to the chief for approval. And once the chief approves a final list of funding, we will then fund those projects. If a new project is out there, Cindy, that needs to be funded for planning, a new planning effort, that's what you want to work with your local state office on, submitting a request for that and going through that process that Ralph had outlined for submitting a new proposal for funding. It does require some level of engineering opinions of what the cost may be, the total cost of the project, some level of completing a CPA 52, and there's a number of other things that have to be completed online to do that proposal. Beth, well, it may have been the last one, Ralph. I was rushing thinking that I had a lot more popped up, but looks like that may be the last one.
Let's see.
All right, Cindy says, here's a follow-up. I was wondering about the feasibility planning funds. I guess they are not new. Oh, okay. I think I understand what you're asking. So to do the reaffirming of feasibility, that's the same as everything else. That's correct. That's not new funding. It's the same funding. What actually happens there, Cindy, is the state would request reaffirming of feasibility as opposed to doing implementation. These are backlog projects. The backlog projects. Breaking up again.
Yeah. If you could just start again.
Okay. So Cindy, the reaffirming feasibility funds are funds for backlog projects. And those backlog projects are ones that were authorized previously by the chief. And then now what we're saying is they're older than 5 years old, those projects are. So because of that, we need to reaffirm the feasibility. The state can simply request that we do that, and we will provide funding to complete a reaffirming of the feasibility. Another option is if they don't want to do a reaffirming of feasibility and they know the project is 20, 30 years old, and they simply want to do a supplemental planning effort, we can skip the reaffirming of the feasibility and just go straight into supplemental planning where we update the plan to address the new resource concerns and the conditions on the ground, and we'll provide funding for that as any other planning effort would be. Was that clear, Ralph?
Yes, that was much clearer. Yep.
Okay, all right. I have to find the right spot for the microphone.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at 52 past the hour, right until the top of the hour. So if we've got any more questions, we'll give folks another minute or two to type those in. Okay, so nothing's popping in yet here, but I guess as Kevin, as I said earlier, we are anticipating, we're hoping we get a big bunch of proposals this time around, and we are looking forward to working with all of you all in the near future, and working through the state cons and the state program managers to help you get your projects going. And we'll be providing a link. I've got to figure out how to get this, the way this Teams works, and I think I may have said this. This is a new system that we're using, and so we're recording this video and it'll upload to a system that's internal to the USDA. And I've got to figure out how to get it out of that and put it into a place where everybody can get to it pretty easily. So pretty much as soon as the meeting's done, this recording is going to be available. I'm like I said, I'm learning here, so just be patient with us. We aim to get this out as quickly as we can, but technology and given the current situations, we're all bobbing and weaving and doing the best we can to get everything squared away.
So
Kevin, we got
one other question popped up, Ralph, from Alan Gehring. He wants to know how a application could exceed the 250,000 in drainage area. So Al, as I mentioned before, the appropriation did state that for projects that are not that does not have flood protection for its primary function, that the 250,000 acre limit is waived. It doesn't apply. It's waived. So for that, if you have a project that the primary purpose is not for water flood protection, and if it's like you said, a drainage, well, you can say what kind of project. If it's like irrigation or some land treatment type of project, then for those projects, you would simply, state the purpose of the project and then, cite that because of it not being flood protection, and we're seeking to have the project authorized. And you would state, as Ralph had showed in one of the demonstrations with the NRCS folks, you would show your HUC 10 areas, and you would show the actual drainage area and the entire watershed. And you would already provide that information. So, we've kind of gone over how to show the areas, and you would show the total watershed area. So, in doing that, we would know that it's not for flood protection, and as a result, that limit does not apply. We'd have to give you the appropriate funding for that, and that's the 18 and 19 funding, and some of the 2020 funding. Some of the 2020 funding does not have that waiver. Is there a template? William Kincaid wants to know if there's a template for the proposal format. So William, let's see. Okay, you're NRCS, so yes, William, there is a template that was provided to your state program manager. I can't see what office you're at. So William, you would want to. Oh, William, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Every time I sit up, it goes out. So I have to sit really close to the mic. So William, you would want to check with the folks in Arkansas. I think that may be Randy, and Walt may even have it, but I think this Randy is your state program manager, and he has a proposal template that we provided for, and there's even a Excel format that was provided too. Alan, is it possible? Lisa wants to know for NRCS, non-NRCS folks get the template too. Yeah, we would just ask that the state offices share it with you. I mean, reach out to the local state office and they would share it with everyone. The template that was provided. Most of the guidance itself was in what Ralph had showed, and in the announcement, the guidance was attached. But the actual online template, you can't access, Lisa, the SharePoint that has the actual form on it. However, there was a form that was put together, and I think it was Ralph. There was another form.
So we're losing you. We lost you again there for a second.
Oh, there was another form that was put together, a template, at least that was put together, that probably could be shared with you all. So the states could provide that. What if the proposal is for both ag and flooding? How does 250K work? So if it has a primary purpose of flooding, for flood protection, Cindy, the ag wouldn't matter. I think by ag you mean the land treatment, but if primary purpose is for flood protection, then that limit would then apply. It doesn't matter about the land part at that point because the primary purpose still includes flood protection. So you would be limited by the 20,000 acres at that point. So basically, the easiest way to look at it, the safest way to look at it, is if you do not have flood protection as part of your project purposes, then you're safer to be able to exceed that 250,000 acres. If there is flood protection in it, then you can't, and you'd be limited to 250,000 acres. Looks like okay. Thought something else popped up. Maybe
got one more minute here. If anyone has a question, speak now. Forever hold your peace. As always, we suggest that you reach out to your state program managers if you've got questions and want to get a proposal going. They should be able to help you. And like I said, we will be providing this presentation. We'll get it out to you some kind of way, even if it's through YouTube. I think we still have an NRCS YouTube, so we could possibly put it there or somewhere else that would be accessible to everyone. But we will let you know all the people that got the Outlook or responded to the Outlook invitation. We can definitely communicate through that to everyone. So it is now top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and close everything out. Again, thank you all for being here today and for participating in the watershed program. As we acknowledge and understand at headquarters that the program happens through the state offices, to the DCs, to our sponsors and partners, and we need y'all's help in order to get these projects completed and get these various activities initiated and out helping the land and helping improve the quality of life in America. So we look forward to that. Kevin, do you have any last comments?
No, excellent job, Ralph. Thank you for everything, and we look forward to a lot of great proposals coming in. Whether we receive them on April the 17th or if we receive them later this summer, either way, we expect some great proposals to come in, and we look forward to an opportunity to do this again in the future.
Okay, thank you. So we'll conclude the presentation. Stop the recording now.